I will now introduce Ritchie from EUROPARC Federation, and you have it's on our website. One can read about you, that you have a background as a teacher and ranger and park manager, and with all your broad experience, you're now the CEO of EUROPARC Federation, working with internationally with protected areas. So a warm welcome, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I actually still think I'm a ranger. I don't think I've really changed jobs. I just think I'm a ranger in a really, really, really big international park now. So I think you'll find a lot of what I'm going to say probably still resonates and relates to that time. So yeah, always a pleasure to be here in Sweden. Well, actually, it's always a pleasure to be anywhere in the north. So thank you very much for your invitation, which came many, many months ago. So it's really great to be here finally. Well, I hope this afternoon that we can... Oh, this keeps happening. I'm scared to touch anything. I hope this afternoon, we'll just basically stimulate some thoughts between us on people and nature and that connection between those things, but in particular, the role of interpretation to reconnect people to their landscapes, to their culture, and I think even to themselves. Maybe that's a little bit ambitious, we shall see. So, EUROPARC Federation, well, we're about bringing people together to learn from each other, to share, to innovate, and to change how we plan and manage our protected areas, just as we are here today. And of course, we do that through networking. Face-to-face meetings, still, I think, the most important way of learning from each other. But of course, we've caught up with the internet these days and use a lot of electronic means to bring people together in order to build capacity, to train, to problem solve our common challenges that we're facing out there. And we do that through workshops, through webinars, through our toolbox, and of course, all the resources are on our website. Please feel free to browse at your leisure. And we're doing that to promote sustainability, because we do need to make better use of our natural and indeed our cultural resources. We need to make sure that we're mitigating and adapting for climate change. And really looking carefully at how us in Europe are using or getting food and where we're getting our food from as repositories for wildlife and of course for our culture too, because for most of us in Europe, we are a part of the landscape, not apart from it. And we're doing all of that, of course, to protect nature, the fundament of our life. And we in EUROPARC do a lot of communication to highlight the meaning and the value of nature to people. And I'll be showing a little film at the end, if I keep to time. I'll be showing a little film at the end that we've recently produced, part of our communications programme of EUROPARC, and I hope you will enjoy it, and I think it really will bring together everything that I'm hoping to say to you this afternoon. Do join us on social media, and of course make use of our website, because people and nature is our business. Because nature knows no boundaries, and EUROPARC is founded on the principle that the future protection and conservation of nature is achieved through international cooperation. Again, that's why we're here. International cooperation works best through personal contact. And through that personal contact comes mutual understanding, shared experiences, knowledge and innovation. I wish I could learn how to use a PowerPoint presentation better. Maybe you could innovate me on that front. Because this delivers better support and management of protected areas, which ensures the future protection and conservation of our nature, because nature knows no boundaries, especially on our little crowded continent. I'm going to talk about nature and landscape and protected areas interchangeably this afternoon, so just pick whichever one suits you best for your purposes. I'm particularly representing protected areas, which of course are all kinds: national parks, nature reserves, peri-urban parks, marine parks, geoparks. We represent them all. We have over 400 members in 37 countries, and that's thousands of protected areas across Europe. And those protected areas are the network of living landscapes that are embedded in our cultural identity. They're sculpted by nature and shaped by people. They've influenced the course of history, inspired artists, thinkers, and they enrich our lives. They are our natural life support system. And these protected areas, I think we're just going to have this problem all afternoon to get used to it, represent the land that is our inheritance, and we hold it in trust for those who come after us. Now, this is my landscape. This is where I come from. This is Stirling, right in the middle of Scotland. It's literally the centre of geography and history of Scotland. It's where history, culture and landscape intersect. And it's part of my personal connection to nature and landscape, and one that's influenced who I am. But I think those connections to landscape are not just the physical environment. They're all those invisible connections that we have with people in that landscape. So I'd like to introduce you to my granny and my grandpa. My granny was born up in the Highlands of Scotland. My grandpa is a fifth generation Stirling son of the rock. Now, these people were born at the end of the 19th century, in the late 1800s, and I think our generation are the last people to be connected to them. Now, the landscape that they grew up on is similar in some ways to what you see here. The castle's still there, the Wallace Monument is still there, and the hills are still there. But of course, in reality, the physical, cultural and political landscape that we now inhabit is very different. Now, my grandpa, in his later life, became a guide at Stirling Castle. He was a great storyteller, so I was very encouraged by your storytelling mantras here in front of me. Now, along came me. Now, as you can see, I was eating for Scotland at that time. And I somehow don't just have their DNA, but I have their knowledge, their memories, their language, their habits, their culture, and a small sense of the landscape that they once inhabited, as you do from your forebears. Now, I grew up in this royal borough, and I played in the castle and in the grounds. I had a bit of a penchant for swings. Again, I don't know why my parents decided to dress me up as a Victorian in the 1960s, but there you go. I learned to swim in the lochs nearby, go fishing with my dad in the river. And as I got older, the swings just got a little bit wilder as I played and roamed in the hills. I'm literally connected to these places. We say that history doesn't repeat itself, but, I think it does a little bit, because there's me 40 years after my grandpa died, leading a procession into Stirling Castle at the IRF Congress in 2006, much as he would have done many years previously. Now, I'm lucky to have had these and many other landscape and nature and cultural experiences all over the world, and these continue to shape me to where I am today. Because as the generations fade away, as we too will one day, it's really made me think about how we are connected to the land, to our culture and to our identity, and the role that we as interpreters have as guides to an increasingly disconnected society, to bring them back to nature and back to themselves. What inheritance will we leave for our next generation? Appreciating the value of nature is the first act towards creating a sustainable world. And by that I mean the intrinsic values, not just the economic values. But as we may consider, appreciating and understanding the value of nature does not necessarily translate into caring enough to change the choices that we make as people and how we use and manage our resources more sustainably. Now, this thinking about nature and indeed how people connect and interact with it is perhaps something we are thinking about as something important, an important response to the challenges and the difficulties that we're facing in modern society. But maybe not, because I'd like to introduce you to a particular Scottish hero of mine. Now, many of you might have heard of John Muir, the father of national parks. Well, I think this is Patrick Geddes. He's really the crazy uncle, I think, of our parks systems, because he really came up with systems of thinking about how we manage and look after these places, how we relate to them. A lot of his thinking was pretty much lost, I think, in time, but thankfully it is coming back too. Now, when I'm talking about interpretation during my talk, I am really talking about nature interpretation. So if there's museum interpreters in the room, I'm sorry. So he came up with a model for planning, which today would be an app, wouldn't it? It's really joining place, work and folk. Now, we think of this as pretty normal thinking now, but back in the day, this was pretty radical. But he also came up with a process of management. which I think is quite, if we stuck to those three principles in our management systems, we couldn't go very far wrong. And I think it's a very good basis for planning our interpretation too. He also considered a philosophy of learning, vivendo decimus, by living we learn. And he very much espoused that any learning needed to be done with the hand, the heart, and the head. And again, I think in there you might see Freeman Tilden's principles of provoke, reveal, and relate, of interpretation. Microcosmos naturae. I think interpretation has a significant role to play to aid our understanding of nature, to show its value, and importantly, to stimulate change in attitude and behaviour. Now, nature can leave us with a sense of awe that's almost ethereal and intangible. We humans have a need for nature that's indefinable. And on a really good day, it can really touch our soul. And when I was a ranger, I certainly realised that people connected to what I was saying with their head, with their heart, and with their hand, but I think with their hand in their pocket, because I think the economic values are something that we do need to consider. Now, EUROPARC members have, EUROPARC members have been trying to do something about that. Our friends in Finland have certainly done a lot of research in this area, discovering that for every euro invested, we get 10 euros back into our society. But here in Wales, they too have looked at the economic values that our protected areas bring to their society. But I ask the question, how are we bringing this into our interpretation? Because currently it is the economic value that's dominant in our society. And we very much risk knowing the cost of everything and the value of nothing. That we're living in a changing world with changing landscapes, changing values and changing climate is something I think we're all aware of. And I think it's something that is generally now accepted. I don't know what's going on here. I think it's gone on to automatic or something, so I apologise. You're going to have to get this in repeat. And I think there is a general consensus that we have to do something about it, and we are doing something about it, even if it is just changing our light bulbs. And I don't know exactly what you said in your speech, but certainly I hope I'm going to reiterate something that you may have mentioned. Because if I were to mention biodiversity loss, there will be tumbleweed. Because I think there is no societal consensus, because people can't feel it. But the figures are clear. I think we've seen it in our own generational stories. Our grandpas might have said, well, remember when there used to be a forest here? Even in my own lifetime, the town of Stirling has doubled in size. We're very good at measuring biodiversity loss, and we've been doing it for 140 years. But it's not lost due to some catastrophic event. It's been a slow, incremental decline. It's about people not making connections between the choices that they're making in their daily lives and their impact on the environment. I think perhaps have we become too good at describing and less good at provoking or inspiring actions? Because once it's gone, it's gone. Now, landscapes, to wait for the action. Landscapes also have their own history. And we too, as we were just thinking about, we have histories on how we see and use that landscape, or how we feel or indeed don't feel about it. So I thought I'd quickly pop you over to France and just explore a little project there that was done just to discover how people did feel about their landscape. So we'll go to the Parc Natural Régional de la Montagne de Reims, northeast of Paris, in the Champagne country, a place steeped in tradition. It's a World Heritage Site where the people are deeply connected to their landscape. Monsieur Rodet here, whose champagne I was enjoying, has been 8 generations with his vineyards. And in the Montagne de Reims is Mont Sinai, the montagne of that area. And here you see the classic interpretive panel on the mountain describing the valley before you. What you might also notice is this large boulder to the right of it. Is this a glacial deposit? What could it be? Well, it's in fact a concrete bunker from World War I. Because right here, right below this hill, was the German-French front line for 4 years. And right below this hill, 70% of the villages were completely destroyed, plundered and brutalised. And in July 1918, 30,000 men died at this site. That's just slightly less than the town of Stirling where I live. This information is not on that viewpoint. Because today you can take a walk through those woods, be immersed in the nature. But once there was a very different route just below the surface. Sometimes we need to look beyond the obvious. And in the park, there are not just the rows of vines, there are too the rows of the lives lost. And this is a hidden landscape. These were the unspoken stories of these people, and certainly, until recently, not part of the interpretation or the park's messages. The stories of the people of this landscape who lived in these villages that remained or indeed survived the brutality. Their connections to this place is painful, traumatic, brutal, and indeed shameful. The scars in the landscape betrayed the scars in their memories. And it was only until recently that the park, over a year, using storytelling and drama and other interpretive installations, were able to retell these stories, relive the drama with the local people. I think it's number 8 on your list of mantras here. Because for many, this was more than just an uncovering of the truth. It was a healing. This is interpretation at its most powerful and at its most profound. Interpretation is not always soft and fluffy. Now these people are much more alive to their history and connected to their landscape. This fracturing of people in the landscapes is much more common in Europe than we perhaps think. Many people have a limited historical and cultural connection to the place where they now live. Many displaced people from only 60 or 70 years ago. How do we go about sharing, acknowledging and agreeing on what values of nature are now? Now, we all need nature and natural spaces close to our home and indeed far away. And what we see and learn from our families, from our villages, from our community imprints on us, even the negative imprints. It imprints us as individuals and collectively as a community and society. And given our increased urbanisation, the need for natural connections and experiences, I think, is more acute than ever. Because kids need nature. It's necessary for their development. But you know what? Nature needs kids, needs people too. People who are engaged, who value it, and whose behaviour and choices reflect that. Because a lack of nature awareness, a lack of nature connection leads to an apathy towards environmental concerns. And maybe that's what we're seeing in society today. Now, EUROPARC does invest in our young people. We have a junior ranger programme. Kullaberg is our only junior ranger programme in Sweden. Come on, Sweden, time to step up. It's about connecting people to the protected areas, but understanding the values of that area and of the nature in it, and about the value of international cooperation. Can I pause this? Is there a pause button on this? Might be easier than going backwards and forwards. I think it's gone on to some automatic, so I'm having to now talk to the slides in rhythm with the slides. Thank God I know what's coming up. Yeah, it's just gone on to some sort of automatic. It's okay, you'll just get to see them all twice. That's fine. Anyway, I'll continue. The thing about junior rangers is they grow up. So we started a new programme called Youth Plus to create ambassadors and young leaders for nature in whatever career path they take. Right, okay, there you go. Don't worry. Listen, I've had worse. So the young people recently got together to create a new manifesto for youth in Europe. I don't have time to go into that today, but it's really about them reclaiming their areas. They want to live in the rural areas and contribute to society there. Do check out our website to find out more about that. But, as I said, we don't necessarily need to... in fact, I think we're pretty doomed if we leave protecting nature just to the conservationists. We need green teachers